Hello everyone, so today I'm going to talk about what are the not so glamorous ways of consulting. I think when it comes to not so glamorous things, people are like, oh, it's not that bad. It's like, yeah, sure, it's stressful, or maybe you have to travel a lot, but what is it really? Because I think a lot of times they only find out after they've joined the job. So I think it's yes and no. Consulting is great, but it does depend on who you are as a person. What are your tendencies and behaviors when it comes to certain situations? And then on top of that, how would you deal with this? Would you leave the job? Would you leave the project? Are you just gonna be like, oh, no, I guess this company's not for me? I think it really does depend on how you evaluate. First of all, I already mentioned it before, but the travel is not so glamorous as what people think. I think a lot of people think oh, we're gonna go to Miami or New York or LA, or maybe even internationally to Copenhagen or Asia in general, but it really isn't gonna be like that. Chances are it really is just wherever the client is based. So I don't wanna kind of throw shade on any of the locations out there, but let's say, for example, client is in the middle of Wisconsin. So that means that anytime you're going on site, you're gonna be stuck going there. I know I don't like to say the word stuck, but maybe the first 2 times or so you'll actually enjoy going because you're like, oh, I've never been to Wisconsin before. I enjoy this, or I like eating this, or maybe you'll have places that you'd want to go to for, oh, every time I go here, I want to go eat at this place, or go to have a beer at this place. So there's usually 2 ways I can help out. Usually in the beginning, when you do all the traveling, it does help out a lot because you're like, oh, I've never been here before, unless you have been there before. And then in that case, you're kind of oh, wow, cool, whatever. But at this point, you may or may not have tried okay, well, now I actually have an expense paid trip. So probably things that you probably did not want to try before, you could probably try now and not be like, oh, I spent money on this. So, and when it comes to that, I think another one is that you have a team. Typically, at least when you go on site, you're probably gonna go with a team. So even if you don't like the location, maybe that your team is not so bad. So you probably wanna hang out with your team. But again, it's not necessarily always gonna be good, because if you don't like your team, you're kind of stuck. And in general, when you have a team, if it is very stressful, you may actually be working with your team the entire time. You may not even be able to explore. So that's one thing. But however, if you go travel a lot in general, then you may actually have some opportunities to explore, maybe 1 or 2 times, maybe a meal or so. So that may not be so bad, but it really isn't something that you can really say every travel is going to be great, every location I'm going to go is going to be great, and then also even the team you're going with could be absolutely horrible. Maybe they expect you to work long hours and in the hotel room, so you can't even do something like call your family or something like that. So there really isn't that much. And I think and when it comes to traveling, what I don't like about it specifically is that I can't really set a home routine. So right now, the way I have it set during the pandemic, and I mean, I guess we can consider this post-pandemic too, for some people. So here in New York, at least, I have set some kind of schedule where 3 times a week, I would actually go to the gym and swim. But then that means that I have to actually be here to go to that gym. However, the good thing is that I did get a gym membership where they have locations all around the country. I just need to be lucky that the place that I'll be going to will have that gym membership. Or maybe I do need to take an Uber or whatever. But most chances, I always almost like to pick a hotel that has a gym or a pool. But then whatever I'm spending money at home, for that gym membership, or maybe even rent, if you end up being one of those people that go often, may not be that worth it. So it just ends up becoming okay, what are you actually doing here? Are you just gonna be using your place at your home as a launch pad, or you're gonna just use it as a way to get all jazzed up and everything? But I think in general, if you were to travel so often, you'll be so tired when you come here. And I did mention in my Why You Should Be a Technology Consultant video over here that sometimes when you do something like this, it could be you fly out on a Sunday night, or maybe even Saturday, depending on where it is, or you might be flying in back home on Friday night or Saturday. So it actually cuts into your weekend. And because of that, it's just you just basically come back here just to say hi to people and then you go back. Again, it's not all gonna be the times like that. I think with COVID, a lot of people are starting to realize oh, you don't actually need to travel to do all this stuff. And some of them are actually making work from home permanently, or some are just saying yeah, we're gonna still doing traveling. So that's what I would say is, depending on the client, depending on the actual budget, depending on the company, or how it's wherever you are in the country or world, it may differ from traveling, because whatever I'm saying right now may not be as bad anymore because you're gonna be mostly home. But people who did want to go to those glamorous places already, they probably can't do that because it will most likely be in the middle of nowhere, depending on where the corporate office is. It's not going to be in a cool city, but even if you did go to a cool city, you probably may or may not be able to explore it that much because you'd be working. So the hours I honestly, because I'm an INTJ, I really hated the fluctuations of hours. So sometimes I may be working 20 hours a week, sometimes I might be working 60 hours a week, and sometimes I may have plans at night or maybe have plans in the morning. Like let's say for example, I want to go work out before I work out, but then maybe the client's like, oh, we have a call. I'm gonna make you come. I'm like, oh no, I have to kind of drop everything and go. And sometimes I even had to like, oh, I have a call now, shoot, I have to drop everything and go on my phone. Literally, I'm not even at my desk, but I would be on my phone and just answering that. Sometimes like just life happens, you know. So that's what I didn't really like about the fluctuation of hours, is that sometimes it really is also dependent on the time zone. So let's, for example, a European company, you'll probably be working in their hours for the most part. So that also means you're gonna be working earlier. And most consulting firms, at least, they do have global teams. Typically, you may have team members in India, you may have team members in Europe or in California. And then now you kind of juggle with all these time zones. It really depends on what is actually gonna work for everyone. And it's never gonna be that great for, depending on how vast and change, and I don't know, how big the differences are of the time zones. So I usually like schedules. Like I mentioned before, I go to the gym like 3 to 4 times a week to go swim. But there's also sometimes, like for example, if I have a pet, I can't take care of the pet. I have to actually rely on my boyfriend to take care of the pets. So the same thing could be with kids. I know like basically I'm just listing off all the cons for my why you should be a technology consultant video, but I did wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about each of these cons, because as the recruiting season is coming up, people are like, oh, I'm gonna go for it. But then maybe they're gonna be deciding between 2 different offers and go like, should I do consulting or should I do this non-consulting role? And sometimes it's better to just kind of have it all in one video so you can kind of see, is that something I'd be willing to do? Probably not. And then if that's so, you want to do some networking to make sure that is actually the case, because this is just the general ones. I'm not actually going to talk about the ones that are going to always happen, because that really does differ by your country, company, team, even project and client. So all of that really does depend, and also even the way that you were brought on, because if maybe you were one of the original team members, you're gonna have a lot more to do, or maybe that's someone who's went on like maternity leave and then you're here to come over and take over, like there may be a lot of work as well. So I think like about hours though, it is important to know that you can set boundaries. However, there aren't gonna be, like you can set boundaries to say like, oh, I need to go pick up my child at 3 p.m. Like, you know, like I need to go to the school and that means I can't make this call. Or that I am gonna probably, like I can make the call, but I can't screen share and I'm the one driving it. Then you either have to go pick up someone, you either have to probably hire a babysitter or whatever to pick that person up, pick your child up, or that you need to, which is actually what I did when I was in training and working, and Addison had to go pick up my boy from the vet. But I can't do that because I was actually in training and they require 100% attendance to be able to get credit for it. So sometimes you'll get that situation. I literally was wondering the other day, like when I did my training, which is basically 9 hours a day for Monday through Friday, plus that included homework. So it could be closer to 10 to 11 hours a day. And then I also had to do client work as well. So I'm gonna actually go into this a little bit later on about training, but I'm like, how would a single mother do this? Like if they were a single mother, they did not get paid well, or they don't have any relatives that are living with them or that are around them, they're kind of screwed, right? Like you probably can't afford to get a babysitter. You probably have to ask someone to pick up their kids or something, and it's going to be very stressful. So a lot of this is just not really that flexible, even when you are working at home. Okay, like when I was doing training, I was working at home, and sometimes at client work, I'm also at home. Like if it was a very important call and something came up, like maybe for example, I mean, like sometimes you do need to set boundaries though. Like for example, like, oh, I need to go pick up my kid from school and I'm the only one. You may just be able to say, yeah, I can't make it, but you do also kind of need to make things work out too. So maybe if during training I had to go out and I didn't have absolutely any way possible, then probably I would bring it on my phone, which I have done that at one point before, where I was like actually like, oh no, the office is closing, I need to go home. So I would actually take it on my phone. Hopefully it did not drop when I was on the subway, but thankfully it did not. And that's what I ended up doing. So a lot of times you do need to set boundaries. There are going to be repercussions most of the times. Like for example, if everyone in your team is working 80-hour weeks and you're the only one working 40 and you're like, nope, I'm cutting off at 40, you may or may not be the one promoted. So that is like something that they should not be firing you on just because you didn't work that much. However, the quality of the work that you're delivering, you need to also be able to prioritize. So if you knew ahead of time and you could have managed your time a little bit better, that is on you. However, if it was something like quick and sudden, like, oh, tomorrow I need you to do this thing and I can't do this because maybe I'm like on vacation, then that's on them. Well, you do have teams, so make sure you actually talk to your team first and say, hey, sorry, I can't do this. Can you help me out? And I've definitely had coworkers that have done that before, like, oh, like I need to go take my cat to the vet, or, oh, my child's birthday is today. promised I would celebrate with them. Because of that, I can't do this tonight. Can you help out? And I would always say yes. Depending on how they approached it, if they just say, yeah, I can't do it. And then I'm like, what? You're not gonna do, like, it just really depends on who's gonna back up with me next time around. And it's really like a relationship. If it's like starting off from the very beginning, depending on how I know them, I would probably say yes, but it does depend on, can I move my schedule around? If I really can't and it's non-negotiable, I said, what about this person? Or what about that person? So this is the part that about consulting I personally don't really like about, is the fact that like you may actually have to do sales. So when you do consulting, you're probably thinking about, ooh, I could do problem solving. I can do all these high impact work with the clients. But at one point, the higher you go, the more sales involved you might get, depending on the role. So usually this means that you need to kind of get like change orders where you can get more hours or time or whatever. And this also might mean like you want to go pursue projects, and sometimes your promotion or compensation even may be based off of these sales. So that is something to consider. If you really don't like sales, then, and you don't really see yourself, and you want to go rise up in the consulting world, it could be very tough. But it honestly isn't that bad, because it's not like, I think a lot of people just have a bad rep for sales. It really is like, oh, are you going to be a door-to-door salesman? I think for most people hate those door-to-door salesmen. But when it comes to consulting, it's a little bit different. It's more like relationship management, where you're like, oh, we can help you out with this. So think about it more as like problem solving, but more in terms of what kind of solutions could we provide rather than doing the solution. I think that's a little bit different, is that as you go higher, you do more managerial work and you do more like administrative work and sales work, but you can still do problem solving. It's just in a different little angle. Another one is that, so there's also team, like I mentioned before. If you don't really have a good team, you're kind of screwed. And because consulting is so team heavy, I've had situations before, if like I had an underperforming team member, or maybe they were just really stressed out and tired or whatever, I always try to provide myself as a resource to them in case like they wanted me to help out. Actually, in most cases, they don't even reach out to me. But it is usually something where like, oh, maybe they need to do this, and then they did not provide like some kind of knowledge transfer session with me before they went on sick leave or PTO or whatever. So I had to actually do everything myself. And sometimes it could be really tough because the client doesn't care. They just want to get whatever they wanted promised to be delivered. But for me, I had all this pressure to do all of this stuff. And sometimes there's a lot of politics involved too with the client or with the firm or even other team members, where things just happen. And then sometimes you may just be the one that has to clean up the mess. Unfortunately, that does happen sometimes. But that is something that like it would be coming along with consulting. You can't always have the perfect team. We do like consulting firms because of the fact that they always be able to staff a lot of talented people, very smart people. It's just like a bunch of smart individuals that are coming together. But sometimes they're, like they're just people, like every other company has people that slack off, or that they're just not really upholding your standards or even the client's standards. And then maybe you're just like trying to go on a race, and you may be stuck with someone or people that may not be able to help out with you as much as you can. Sometimes it also means that you're brand new to the firm or brand new to the project, and you're like, I don't even know how to do this, but the person that is throwing you into this absolutely is not providing any training at all or helping you out at all. So sometimes you may be stuck on learning on your own. All of this is really on like, okay, how resourceful are you? You can always resort to other people. And this is also kind of like a skill of your own too, is like, what would you do if this happened? And that's what they always do in your interviews. Like, tell me about a time when you had a underperforming team member. What did you do? So that always happens. So make sure that you sharpen your team skills, because it's not really just about what they're supposed to do. It's also what you're supposed to do about the situation. The last one I mentioned about training, and I do have a training vlog, so definitely check out over here. It really is going to show you the brutal truth of how it's like to do training. It seems pretty cool, kind of, where it's like, oh, you're not working, or you're just like kind of learning, and sometimes it's really difficult depending on your level of expertise or your level in general before the class. But like for me, when I was pretty advanced in this particular topic that the training was about, it was still stressful because you're supposed to show up the full time. Like that's actually the hardest part, is like actually showing up for the full 9 hours and then doing the homework. You honestly don't even have to do the homework. For some courses, they don't actually require the homework. It's just gonna help you with the exam. And then the exam comes along, and usually they just like throw you into it. They prepare you, however, it's just so stressful. Sometimes you're just like, oh my God, what if the firm found out that I failed? Or what happens if I failed this and that? What would people think about this? Would I get demoted? Would this hurt against my performance achievement? So it really does depend on your relationship and also how well or how poorly you do, I guess, on this training. But in general, like for example, I mentioned I had to do client work. I like literally, 8 to 11:30, which is 8 a.m. to 11:30. That's when I did client work because the client was like, oh, you have some time available. Let's just do it. Some clients, at least, like they have been very understanding. They're like, okay, we're not going to bother you. Some teams as well are not going to bother you too. However, there's some team members who are like, oh, Christine, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? And you're the only person. And I'm like, fine, I guess I have to because I'm a team player. But then you have to do training 11:30 a.m. to whatever time it ends. In my case, it was 8:30 p.m. and sometimes it does run late, maybe 1 or 2 hours late. And then there's also homework. So the homework could be required or not, but for some it's like maybe not. For me, it was actually not required, but I still did it out of my own conscience. It was like 1 to 2 hours of work a day. And then you have to do your actual studying for the exam. Like, that's where I'm like, how would a single mom do this? You know, like you have to study, you have to also, like maybe like I don't know, imagine your kids are just running around in the background like, mommy, daddy, mommy's sister's like hair's pulling my hair, what do I do now? Maybe they need to go to the doctor, or maybe they need to go to soccer practice. How would you do that? And what if you're a single mom? So it is really, really stressful with training. And when it comes to technology consulting, there's a lot of certifications, a lot of training that you need. So imagine this times 10. I think a lot of people, they don't really get that certified. I mean, for me, I am pretty certified. I have like a lot of certifications, like over 8 maybe by this point. But if you want to do better in consulting, it's all about how many certifications do you have? How much experience do you have? How much do you know? What is your educational background, work experience probably too. So all that comes together, and usually if you're young and you have time, you got to do the certifications. But just because you have time doesn't mean it's not going to be too much work on you. So those are all of the not so glamorous parts of consulting, specifically technology consulting. And I just wanted to ask you guys, let me know down below, is there anything else that I did not talk about? Let me know down below, and let me see if I can, and I can probably relate to you for a lot of things too. But if you have any misconceptions, or if there's anything specifically about consulting or something like that that you're curious about, you're deciding if consulting is for you or not, just let me know down below in the comments, and maybe we can help each other out. So thank you guys so much, and see you guys next time. Bye.